G'day campers, and welcome back to the cozy camp. The rain's falling steady on the leaves tonight, thunder rolls far off in the distance, and the fire crackles warmly here in our little shelter. Out there, the river keeps flowing, carrying the storm along with it, while the forest whispers and stirs. Here at the cozy camp, there's no rush and no worries. Just the rhythm of the rain, the glow of the fire, and stories of the animals that share this world with us. Over the next hour, I'll be your guide through the storm, sharing gentle facts and tales about creatures of the night, told slowly, softly, to help you drift and rest. So, settle in by the fire. Let the rain ease your mind and the thunder roll you deeper into calm. Tonight, we'll begin with one of the forest's most curious tricksters, the raccoon. G'day campers, settle in, pull your swags a bit closer to the fire, because the storm's just kicking off. The rain's hammering the roof, thunder's grumbling away out there, and the flames are giving us just enough glow to keep the dark honest. Beyond the firelight, in the dripping black of the forest, I can almost see it now, a little masked figure slipping through the puddles, curious eyes flashing with mischief. Tonight, we're talking about the raccoon. Now, we don't have raccoons here in Australia, and honestly, maybe that's a blessing. We've already got possums pinching fruit, cockatoos tearing timber off verandas, and bloody magpies dive-bombing your head as soon as spring arrives. Add raccoons to that mix, and none of us would stand a chance. But over in North America, they're everywhere. In the bush, in the suburbs, in the middle of cities. As common as magpies in September, and every bit as bold. You'll know them by that black fur stretched across their eyes, like a bandit's mask, and that striped tail swaying behind them. They're not big, 5 to 10 kilos, knee-high at best, but they carry themselves like they own the joint. Cheeky little buggers, always poking about, never far from trouble. And smart, bloody smart. They're what scientists call opportunistic omnivores, which is just a fancy way of saying they'll eat anything that doesn't eat them first. Out in the bush, they'll go for berries, frogs, fish, bird eggs, insects, even a mouse if it's unlucky. In town, they'll raid your bin, scoff your dog's kibble, or run off with the crust off your pizza. They're survivors through and through, but it's not just what they eat, it's how they do it. Their paws are their secret weapon. 5 nimble fingers, not quite hands, but close enough to make you do a double take. Those paws are strong, clever, and sensitive as anything. Nearly 2/3 of their brain power for senses is tied to touch. That means they see the world through their fingertips. Give a raccoon a latch, a jar, a tricky lock, chances are it'll figure it out. Scientists gave them puzzles once, little contraptions to get food out. They solved them quick, and here's the kicker. 3 years later, when the puzzles came back, they still remembered how. Think about that. A little masked critter, barely bigger than a cat, carrying memories sharp enough to rival some humans. Now picture it, campers. Out there by the river in this storm, a raccoon crouched at the bank, fur dripping, mask shining wet. Thunder cracks, lightning splits the sky, and it dips those clever paws into the current, feeling for muscles hidden under stones. To us, it looks like it's washing its dinner. That's where the name Lotor comes from, the washer. But the truth's even better. The water sharpens their touch. turning every ripple and pebble into detail. They're not cleaning their food, they're seeing with their hands. And don't think they're clumsy little groundhuggers. Raccoons are cracking climbers. Their back ankles can rotate almost all the way around, so they can scoot up a tree and even come back down head first, like a possum. That's rare, and bloody handy if you need to make a quick exit. They're no strangers to water either. Creek, marsh, flooded street, they'll swim across without batting an eyelid. Rain and storm don't bother them. They're right at home in the wet, prowling and probing, while the rest of the forest hunkers down. That's the raccoon for you, campers. Small, scrappy, clever, and built for trouble. The sort of animal that thrives because it never stops poking at the world. Out there in the storm, with lightning for a lantern and rain for a drumbeat. The raccoon's mask flashes once in the dark and then it's gone, off on another midnight mission. Now campers, here's the thing about raccoons. They don't just stick to the bush. They've cracked the code of living alongside people better than most animals ever could. Out in the wild, they'll den in hollows and burrows, tight little hideouts in logs or trees. But in town, they've claimed the suburbs, chimneys, storm drains, under porches, even curled up in an attic like they're paying rent. I've even heard of them hopping on trains, riding along, and jumping off like they knew exactly where they were going. See, while most critters steer clear of us, raccoons have worked out that where humans are, there's food. Bins brimming with scraps, dog bowls left on the back porch, compost heaps, veggie patches, a 5-star buffet if you're bold enough to pinch it. And raccoons are more than bold. They don't sneak in, grab a bite, and dash. No, they'll sit there in the open, chewing through your leftovers, and give you that look. The one that says, "Yeah, mate, I'm eating your dinner. What of it?" Cheeky as hell. Some people hate them for it. Call them pests, accuse them of spreading disease, spend a fortune trying to keep them out. But others see them as neighbors, just doing what they have to. You can't help but respect that. A creature that can thrive in swamps, forests, and cities. It's earned its place. But it's not all been raids and mischief. There's family too. When the little ones are born, they're called kids. No bigger than your hand, blind and helpless, clinging to their mum. And she's fierce about protecting them. She'll fight off things twice her size if she has to. She nurses them, teaches them, leads them out when they're ready. By the time they're 2 months old, they're tagging along after her, scrambling up trees, splashing in streams, learning how to use those clever paws. Picture it. The storm's raging, rain cutting down in sheets, lightning ripping across the sky. A mother raccoon edges along a slippery branch, striped tail swaying for balance. Behind her, a line of drenched little kids wobble and squeak, their masks flashing white in the storm. Every crack of thunder makes them jump, but they keep going, one paw in front of the other, learning the way of their kind. And since we're by the fire, let's stir it up a bit. Folks sometimes ask, could a human beat a raccoon in a fight? You'd think so. We've got the weight and the reach, but raccoons aren't the type to roll over. Corner one and you'll find out quick how scrappy they can be. Teeth sharp enough to tear deep, claws that'll rake your arms, and a grip like you wouldn't believe. They twist, they bite, they hang on. Sure, a person might overpower one in the end, but not without walking away bleeding and wondering why they bothered. The raccoon might not win, but it'll make damn sure you don't forget the encounter. Best answer? Don't fight a raccoon. You'll lose more than your pride. And here's something that makes the story even stranger. For all their cheek and toughness, raccoons aren't built for long lives out in the wild. 2, maybe 3 years is all most of them get, thanks to predators, sickness, and cars. But in safety, in captivity, in sanctuaries, they can push past 20 years. Imagine that. 2 decades of raiding scraps, solving puzzles, and giving people that look. It's no wonder they found a place in stories. In Native American traditions, the raccoon shows up time and again as the trickster. Not cruel, not evil, just clever. A rogue that outsmarts stronger animals and slips out of danger. When you've seen one fiddling with a latch or boldly rifling through a bin, you get it. They live by brains and cheek, not brute strength. And here's a curveball for you. People once thought they were dog-like, but no. Their closest relatives are bears. Hard to wrap your head around, isn't it? That the mighty grizzly and this little masked bin raider are cousins of a sort. One rules the mountains, the other rules the suburbs. Both survivors, both tougher than they look. So here at the cozy camp, as the rain drums steady and the fire burns low, picture the raccoon out there beyond the trees. 1 minute it's probing a riverbank for crayfish. The next, it's padding across a fence, a stolen crust of bread in its paws. Always busy, always curious, always finding its way. Now, campers, we've had a good yarn about raccoons in the bush, in the suburbs, and even their place in old stories. But there's still more to chew on with this cheeky little bandit. For one thing, they're quicker than you'd think. When they need to, they can sprint in short bursts, up to 25 clicks an hour. Not long-distance runners, but sprinters, darting across the road or vanishing into the scrub before you've even registered they were there. Outpacing a startled dog, slipping through a fence, gone before you can blink. Winter doesn't beat them either. In colder places, they don't fully hibernate like their big bear cousins, but they do slow down. They'll hole up in dens, sometimes alone, sometimes with a couple of mates, curled tight against the chill. Weeks can pass like that. Then, when the frost lifts and the world softens again, they emerge hungry, bold, and ready to get back to business. Out in the wild, life's often short. Coyotes, bobcats, owls, all keen to take them if they can. And the biggest killer of all? Cars. Being bold has its costs, and roads aren't forgiving. That's why most raccoons in the wild only see 2 or 3 years. But in safety, away from predators and traffic, they can push past 20. 20 years of bin raiding, puzzle solving, tree climbing cheek. Imagine that. A lifetime of mischief stretched across 2 decades. And they're not just bush critters anymore. They've snuck into pop culture too. You've probably heard of Rocket Raccoon from Guardians of the Galaxy. Foul-mouthed, scrappy, smarter than anyone expects. Now, that one's blasting about in space, sure, but the spirit of the character's spot on. Loud, clever, underestimated, and tough enough to survive against the odds. That's the raccoon way. But what sticks with me isn't just the mischief or the fighting spirit. It's the curiosity. Raccoons explore for the sake of it. They'll poke their noses and paws into anything new. A hollow log, a bin lid, a shiny trinket. They're problem solvers, but they're also adventurers in their own small way. There's something oddly human about that restless drive to to see what's possible, what's hidden, what's next. So let's paint the picture one last time. The storm's still raging. The fire here at Cozy Camp spits and cracks, glowing low against the dark. Out beyond, a raccoon pads through the wet grass, striped tail dragging, mask glistening when the lightning flashes. One moment, it's nosing through the mud by the river. The next, it's halfway up a tree, claws sinking into the bark, eyes alive with mischief. Always busy, always searching, always surviving. They've earned their title as bandits, sure, but they're more than thieves of scraps. They're adapters, explorers, tricksters, battlers, cousins of bears, spirits of the night, survivors of both bush and city. And when you think of toughness, of cleverness, of cheek wrapped into one little body, think of the raccoon. So next time you hear the rain on the roof or glimpse movement by the water's edge, imagine that masked rogue, a little warrior thriving in the storm, never afraid to get its paws wet. And now, campers, as our raccoon slips off into the shadows, let's leave mischief behind. The fire's burning low, the rain keeps falling steady, and it's time to meet another creature altogether. From restless trickster to slow dreamer, from cheek to calm, we turn now to the sloth. Alright, campers, the rain's still coming down steady, the fire's burning low, and after our cheeky raccoon slipped into the shadows, it's time to meet a very different sort of creature. Where the raccoon was restless, always fiddling, always moving, this next animal lives at the opposite end of the scale. Tonight, we're going to drift into the slow, dreamlike world of the sloth. Now, if raccoons are the bandits of the night, sloths are the monks of the forest. They don't hurry, they don't fuss. They just drift through life at their own pace. Living mostly in the rainforests of Central and South America, they spend nearly all their time up in the treetops, hanging upside down from branches like living hammocks. And in a way, they are hammocks, a warm, shaggy cradle of calm in a world that never stops rushing. You might have seen photos of them, round faces that almost look like they're smiling, big sleepy eyes, long limbs tipped with hooked claws, and that slow, deliberate way of moving. They've got a look about them that makes people fall in love instantly. There's something oddly comforting about an animal that just doesn't care about rushing. In a world where everyone's running late and stressing out, the sloth is a reminder that sometimes it's all right to just take it easy. But don't mistake their slow pace for laziness. The sloth's whole lifestyle is a survival strategy. Moving slowly helps them blend in with the trees, almost invisible to predators. If you move like the branches sway, you don't get noticed. Jaguars, eagles, snakes, all dangerous hunters in the rainforest, rely on spotting movement. A sloth that hardly stirs is a sloth that gets left alone. And it's not just about hiding. Moving slowly saves energy, and energy is precious when your diet's nothing but leaves. See? Sloths don't get around scoffing frogs or fruit like raccoons. They're leaf eaters, and leaves are tough to survive on. Low in nutrients, hard to digest, not much bang for your buck. But the sloth has turned that disadvantage into a way of life. They've got huge stomachs full of specialized bacteria that slowly break down the leaves, a process that can take days. Their metabolism is so sluggish that even their body temperature can drift with the weather. On cool days, they slow down even more, barely moving at all. Now here's a wild fact. It can take a sloth a whole month to digest one meal. Imagine that, campers. One plate of salad lasting you 4 weeks. No wonder they don't bother rushing about. The energy they save by staying still is the energy that keeps them alive. Picture one now. Out there in the rainforest, not far from our imaginary cozy camp, hanging upside down on a dripping branch. The rain streaming off its fur, lightning flickers across the canopy, and the sloth just blinks, slowly, unfazed by it all. A jaguar might pad silently below, a harpy eagle might soar above, but the sloth doesn't twitch. Its stillness is its strength. They're masters of camouflage too. Their fur often grows green algae, a layer of plant life living right on their backs. It gives them a greenish tint, blending them into the leaves and branches around them. In fact, that algae isn't just for disguise. There are tiny moths that live their entire lives in sloth fur, feeding on the algae. And when the sloth climbs down once a week to poop, the moths use that chance to lay eggs in the droppings. It's a little ecosystem, right there in a shaggy coat. And yes, you heard that right. Sloths only come down from the trees about once a week, just to do their business. It's one of the strangest habits in the animal kingdom. Think about it. Most animals poop whenever they need to, not the sloth. It holds on, sometimes for days, then carefully makes the long, risky trip down to the forest floor, digs a little hole, does its business, and climbs back up. Scientists still aren't entirely sure why. Some reckon it's to fertilize the trees they live in. Others say it helps the moths in their fur complete their life cycle. Whatever the reason, it's a dangerous ritual. Sloths are at their most vulnerable on the ground, and many fall prey to predators during this weekly outing. It's like they've traded safety for a strange sort of loyalty to their trees. But when they are in the trees, they're superbly adapted. Those long, curved claws hook perfectly around branches, locking them in place even when they're fast asleep. And they do sleep up to 15, sometimes even 20 hours a day. Hanging there upside down, barely breathing, almost blending into the forest itself. If you walked past and glanced up, you might not even notice one unless it blinked. Now you might be wondering, do sloths ever hurry? The answer is, not really. Even at their fastest, they move at around 4 meters per minute. That's slower than most people's casual walking pace. On the ground, they're even clumsier, dragging themselves awkwardly with those long claws. But in water, that's where they surprise you. Sloths are actually good swimmers. They can hold their breath for up to 40 minutes, using slow, steady strokes to move through rivers. It's one of the rare times they look almost graceful, gliding through the water while the rain pours down around them. There are 2 main types of sloths, 2-toed and 3-toed. Both live in Central and South America. Both slow as a Sunday morning, but with a few differences. 2-toed sloths are a bit bigger and have a more varied diet. sometimes nibbling fruit or even small animals. Three-toed sloths are more strictly leaf eaters and tend to look a bit more like they're smiling. Either way, both are living reminders that speed isn't always the key to survival. And here's something campers might find a bit confronting. Sloths have some of the lowest muscle mass of any mammal their size. Their whole body is tuned for efficiency, not strength. They couldn't wrestle a raccoon, let alone fend off something big. But that's the beauty of it. They don't need to. Their strength is in being overlooked, in moving so slowly the forest forgets they're there. In a way, that's its own kind of toughness. So as the rain falls heavy on the cozy camp roof and thunder rolls through the jungle, think about the sloth out there, not rushing, not fussing, just swaying gently with the branches, algae in its fur, moths hidden in its coat, an entire tiny world drifting along with it. The raccoon was a trickster, always busy, but the sloth is a drifter, patient, quiet, and strangely powerful in its stillness. They're not lazy, they're not weak, they're proof that sometimes the best way to survive a storm is to barely move at all. All right, campers, we've had a squiz at how the sloth lives slow and steady, but what about when the world comes knocking? Because even the calmest creatures got to face danger. Out in the rainforest, sloths have predators just like anything else. Jaguars prowl the ground, silent as shadows. Harpy eagles circle above, talons sharp enough to snatch a monkey straight off a branch. And snakes, massive boa constrictors, wind their way through the canopy too. For most animals, that's a death sentence. But the sloth? Its greatest defense is doing nothing at all. See, a jaguar hunts by movement. An eagle scans for a shift in the leaves. A snake senses vibrations. A sloth barely stirs. Its heartbeat is slow. Its movements almost invisible. It blends so well that more often than not, predators pass right by. Imagine that. Campers hanging in the trees, rain dripping off your fur, a jaguar padding below, sniffing the air, and you don't even twitch. That's courage. Or maybe it's just trust in stillness. Either way, it works. But sometimes being still isn't enough. And when a sloth does have to fight, well, it's not a scrapper like a raccoon, but don't count it out. Those long claws, hooked for branches, double nicely as weapons if something gets too close. A swipe from a sloth is slow but heavy, and those claws can leave nasty marks. Most predators don't want to risk it unless they're desperate, and if worst comes to worst, the sloth's got one more trick. It can drop straight from the trees into a river and swim away. Graceful in water, remember? It's like a secret getaway hatch from the canopy. Now, family life for sloths is simple but touching. Females usually give birth to a single baby at a time. That tiny sloth clings to its mum's belly for months, holding tight as she climbs, rests, and eats. For the youngster, mum's fur is the whole world. She teaches it what leaves to eat, how to climb, even how to move with that same slow rhythm. Imagine the patience it takes, every lesson drawn out, every movement a demonstration of slowness as survival. And when the youngster's ready, usually after about 6 months to a year, it'll shuffle off on its own, climbing into the canopy to start a slow life of its own. Picture it, campers. The storm still rolling, lightning cutting the sky. A mother sloth clings to a dripping branch, fur slick with rain, her baby pressed to her chest. Every sway of the tree rocks the little one like a cradle, thunder booming in the background. There's danger out there, sure, but for now, all is calm, and the slow rhythm of the sloth's heartbeat keeps them steady. Now, since we're all mates here at Cozy Camp, let's poke the fire with a cheeky question. Could a human beat a sloth in a fight? At first glance, you'd think yes. Humans have the size, the speed, the smarts. A sloth moves slower than a hungover tradie on a Monday morning. But here's the catch. Those claws, long, hooked, and strong enough to hang their whole body weight for days at a time. If a sloth decided to swing, you'd know about it. Sure, you'd eventually overpower it, but not without a few bloody good scratches, and maybe a story you wouldn't want to tell down the pub. That said, most sloths wouldn't bother. Fighting's not their way. They'd rather stay still, invisible, and avoid the drama altogether. If the raccoon's cheeky and scrappy, the sloth's more like that quiet bloke at the bar who doesn't say much. But when he does, you listen. Sloths aren't just part of the forest, though. They're part of the stories people tell too. Ancient tribes in South America wove them into myths as symbols of patience, resilience, and sometimes even laziness. Though I reckon that last one misses the point. In some tales, sloths are guardians of the forest, creatures so calm and steady that they hold the jungle in balance. Watching one in the wild, you can see how that might feel true. And here's something you might not know. The sloths alive today are just the small cousins of giants. Thousands of years ago, there were ground sloths that grew to the size of elephants. Megatherium, they called them. Imagine that. A sloth as tall as a house, lumbering across the land, tearing at trees with massive claws. They vanished around the same time humans spread through the Americas. Some reckon we hunted them. Others say climate shifts did them in. But the tiny treetop sloths we see now are echoes of those giants, survivors of a much bigger story. Back to the present, though. For all their calm, sloths still have to keep themselves clean. Or, well, as clean as they care to. That algae in their fur doesn't make them smell too flash, and their slow lifestyle means parasites like to tag along. But they don't seem to mind much. In fact, the whole algae moth sloth cycle shows how connected they are to their world. They're not just animals living in the forest. They are the forest, trees, leaves, moths, and all. And if you've ever watched one move, you'll know it's hypnotic. Every action drawn out, like time itself, has slowed down just for them. Watching a sloth eat a leaf can feel like watching a whole storm pass overhead. It's patience made flesh. So here at Cozy Camp, while the rain lashes down and the fire glows steady, think of the sloth not as lazy, but as deliberate. Every choice, every movement, stretched out, conserving energy, blending in, surviving in its own way. Where the raccoon darts and schemes, the sloth drifts and endures. Both are battlers, but each in their own style. And the sloth's style, campers, is slowness as strength. Now campers, before we let the sloth drift off into the night, there are a few more bits of this strange creature's story worth sitting with. We've talked about how it moves, how it eats, how it raises its young. But the sloth has more quirks than most animals packed together. For starters, let's talk about their bodies. A sloth's skeleton is unusual, built for a life upside down. Their internal organs are shifted in a way that lets them hang without squashing themselves. Their rib cage is long and wide, giving space for that giant stomach full of leaves. And their muscles? Thin and wiry, not bulky. That's why they look a bit floppy on the ground. They're not designed for speed, but for suspension. Hanging costs them almost no energy. They can dangle from a branch while dead asleep, and even if they die in that position, their claws keep them anchored. Morbid maybe, but it shows how perfectly tuned they are for their lifestyle. And here's a fun one. Sloths have some of the slowest metabolisms of any mammal. Their hearts beat less than half the rate of a typical animal their size. Sometimes their breathing pauses for minutes, like they're halfway between life and dreaming. In cold weather, their temperature can drop dangerously low, leaving them almost comatose. Yet somehow, they push through. Where most animals would fail, the sloth just slows down even further, riding out the storm in silence. You might think that makes them fragile, but here's the kicker. Sloths are surprisingly tough. Their slow metabolism makes them resistant to many diseases. Their wounds heal slowly but cleanly, and because they move so little, they rarely draw attention from parasites that feed on motion or warmth. In their own sluggish way, they're survivors. Sloths also have a bizarre relationship with time. In human terms, they live about 20 to 30 years in the wild if they're lucky. That's decades of slow motion life, decades of leaves, of rainstorms, of swaying branches. Imagine living long enough to watch the same tree grow, bloom, and die, all while barely leaving its canopy. Their lives are stretched thin and quiet, but they're long, steady arcs compared to many of the forest's faster residents. And remember that weekly toilet trip we talked about earlier? Scientists still argue over why they risk it. Some reckon it's dangerous and inefficient. Others say it's key to the ecosystem that lives in their fur. Either way, it's iconic. The slowest animal in the forest, making one of the riskiest journeys, once a week, like clockwork. There's something almost ritualistic about it. Now, campers, let's check in with that cheeky question again. Could a human beat a sloth in a fight? We've asked it of the raccoon, and now here we are with a creature that moves slower than a drunk snail. You'd think the answer's obvious. But here's the twist. Fighting a sloth wouldn't be like fighting a possum or a raccoon. It'd be more like wrestling with a stubborn tree branch that doesn't want to let go. Those claws can hook deep, and the sloth can cling with a grip that's nearly unbreakable. You might win on speed and strength, but you'd walk away with scratches that tell the story. And really, who's the bigger fool? The bloke who tried to fight a sloth, or the sloth that carried on munching leaves after he left. The sloth's story stretches beyond the forest, though. They've become cultural icons. In Central and South America, some people see them as symbols of patience and balance, almost spiritual reminders to slow down. In our modern world, they've become mascots for relaxation. You've seen them on t-shirts, coffee mugs, cartoons. Whole internet memes are built around the idea of living sloth mode. There's something universal in that face, the sleepy smile that says, "Don't worry, mate. Take it easy." But they're more than symbols. They're part of fragile ecosystems. Rainforests are shrinking, cut back by logging, farming, and cities. For sloths, losing trees means losing their whole world. Some species are already endangered, clinging to the last scraps of habitat. Conservationists are out there trying to protect them, building bridges across roads so sloths can travel safely, rescuing those hit by cars or tangled in power lines. Every effort helps, because once a sloth's patch of forest is gone, so is the sloth. And that brings us back to something bigger. Watching sloths teaches us patience, sure, but it also reminds us that survival comes in many forms. Some creatures survive by fighting, some by running, some by tricking their enemies. The sloth survives by slowing down so much that the world flows around it. It's a lesson, campers. Sometimes strength looks like stillness. Sometimes the way to endure the storm is not to push against it, but to drift with it. Picture it now, for the last time tonight. The cozy campfire is glowing low, the rain steady on the roof, thunder rolling far off in the jungle. Out there in the canopy, a sloth hangs, unmoved. Rain runs down its fur. Algae gives it a green glow. Moths rest quietly in its coat. It doesn't flinch, doesn't hurry, doesn't fight. It just sways gently with the branch, waiting for the storm to pass. That's the sloth campers. Not lazy, not weak. A quiet battler of the forest, built to last in ways most creatures can't. A reminder that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is nothing. Now campers, we've seen how the toucan lives loud in the treetops, juggling fruit, clacking bills, and making a racket. But these birds aren't just part of the forest. They're stitched into the human imagination as well. Long before tourists came to snap photos or beer companies slapped toucans on posters, people of the Americas were telling stories about them. The Maya believed the toucan's beak held the colors of the sun. When you saw that fiery orange and red blaze in the trees, it wasn't just decoration. It was the jungle carrying the light of the heavens. Shamans wore toucan feathers in ceremonies, convinced that when the bird croaked, it wasn't noise at all, but the voices of ancestors cutting through from the spirit world. Some cultures painted toucans on pottery and carvings as guardians, symbols of protection and watchfulness. A bird with a beak like fire and a voice that shook the canopy had to be sacred. Think about that the next time you hear one. It's easy to laugh at their croaks, to compare them to frogs or squeaky hinges. But in a dark rainforest, when that sound echoes for kilometers, it really does feel otherworldly. Sitting here at Cozy Camp, you could close your eyes and believe the jungle itself was speaking. Skip forward a few centuries and the toucan found a new stage, advertising. most famously Guinness beer, a toucan balancing a pint on its massive bill, grinning as if it knew something cheeky. Why a toucan? Because it's bold, colorful, unforgettable. That's exactly what a company wants. An animal that sticks in your mind. And once it was out there, the connection stuck. Even today, some people can't see a toucan without thinking of stout. But they're not just beer mascots. Kids love them. Bright colors, funny voices, oversized bills. They're like cartoon characters that happen to be real. Toucans show up in films, TV, memes, even video games. On social media, a photo of a toucan tossing a berry into the air racks up likes in no time. They've become icons of tropical fun, a symbol that says exotic, exciting, playful. Yet behind the fame and the flash lies a harder truth. The toucan's home is vanishing. The rainforests of Central and South America are being cut back for farming, logging, and cities. Every hollow tree taken is one less nest site. Every fruiting branch lost is one less meal. Toucans can adapt a bit. They'll forage at the edges of human settlements, raid orchards, even perch on fences. But their soul belongs to the forest. Without it, they can't survive in the long run. Some species are already in strife. The yellow-browed toucanet, for example, is critically endangered, clinging to the last scraps of Peruvian forest. Others are slipping quietly towards threatened status as their homes shrink. Add to that the illegal pet trade, people snatching toucans from the wild because they look impressive in cages, and you've got a recipe for decline. But a toucan in a cage isn't the same bird. In the wild, it's a juggler, a singer, a gardener of the jungle. In captivity, it's just a shadow of itself. That's why conservation matters. Groups across South America are fighting to protect rainforest corridors, create sanctuaries, and crack down on illegal trade. Some are building canopy bridges across roads so birds like toucans can travel safely. Others are planting fig trees, knowing that a forest without fruit is a forest without toucans. Protect the bird, and you protect a whole ecosystem. And it's not just science. Locals living alongside toucans often see them as neighbors, not pests. Farmers might shake their heads when a flock raids their fruit trees, but they also know the birds bring tourists, photographers, and researchers. Slowly the idea is spreading that keeping toucans alive is worth more than cutting down every tree. Now, since we've made it a cozy camp tradition, let's poke the fire with that cheeky question again. Could a human beat a toucan in a fight? On paper, yes. We've got the size, the smarts, the reach. But think it through. You swing, it flaps away. You chase, it vanishes sideways. That massive beak turning thin as a stick in profile. And if you corner it, you'll cop a sharp jab that'll leave you bleeding and cursing. More than that, you'll cop the humiliation of being outsmarted by a bird with a fruit obsession. And if a whole flock gets involved, you'll walk away with scratches, ringing ears, and a story no one at the pub will let you forget. Let's take a step back now, campers, and think about what the toucan teaches us. The raccoon showed us mischief and resourcefulness. The sloth reminded us to slow down and find strength in stillness. The toucan's lesson: be bold. Don't be afraid to be loud, to stand out, to wear your colors proudly. Life's not just about blending in. Sometimes it's about making sure the world hears you, but also remember, your survival is tied to your home. You can't be bold without a branch to perch on. So here's the picture I'll leave you with. The fire's glowing low, casting just enough light to keep the shadows friendly. The rain outside has eased to a steady patter, soft and soothing. High in the canopy, toucans settle into their hollows. Parents tuck chicks beneath wings, keeping them safe from the night. A few late calls echo across the jungle, not the rowdy racket of the day, but a softer chorus, as if they're saying goodnight to each other. For a moment, the forest feels like it's exhaling. That's the toucan, campers. Loud and proud by day, tender and watchful by night. A bird that lives life in full color, that turns the jungle into a stage, but still remembers the quiet duties of family and flock. And as those colors fade into the dark, we turn back to our fire, ready for the next guest of Cozy Camp. From loud beaks and croaking choruses, we'll move to something calmer again. The capybara, the gentle giant of the riverbanks. But that's a yarn for another stretch of the night. For now, let the toucan's brightness linger in your mind as the embers glow and the rain keeps time. Next up, campers, shuffle up closer to the fire, because our next guest isn't shy. If the sloth was the dreamer and the raccoon was the rogue, then this one's the show-off. The toucan doesn't whisper through the branches. It doesn't melt into the background. It struts into the spotlight with colors blazing and a voice that cuts through the jungle like a brass band at midnight. Now picture it. The forest is thick, branches twisting, vines hanging heavy, and out of that green world bursts a flash of black and white, with a beak that looks like it belongs in a cartoon. Reds, yellows, oranges, sometimes a splash of blue or green, all glowing in the dim canopy light. A beak so big, you'd think the poor bugger would topple forward. That, mates, is the toucan's signature look. There are more than 40 different species spread across Central and South America. From the big Toko toucan, king of the clan with a beak nearly the size of your hand, to the smaller aracaras and toucanets that look like pocket-sized versions of the same design. Each one has its own flair. Some have glowing orange bills. Others have streaks of emerald green or tips dipped in scarlet. It's like nature handed out highlighters and said, "Go on, make yourself impossible to miss." But here's the kicker. Despite all that color, toucans can vanish when they want to. Face them head on and that enormous bill almost disappears, a thin line against the branches. Their bodies are mostly black, which blends right into the shadows. One moment you see a glowing beak blazing like stained glass, the next it's gone, tucked sideways, hidden. They're magicians as much as they're performers. Now, that beak, it's one of the most ridiculous bits of kit in the animal kingdom. At first glance, it looks heavy enough to drag the bird down, but in truth it's light as balsa wood, hollow, filled with spongy tissue, and reinforced with keratin. It's strong, without weighing much at all, like a surfboard, big but buoyant. And it's not just for show. That beak's a multi-tool. First job, reaching food. A toucan can sit steady on a branch and use its bill like tongs to grab fruit hanging further out. No need to risk falling. Second job, cooling. Toucans live in hot, sticky forests, and that bill's packed with blood vessels. By flushing blood through it, they dump excess heat the way we take off a jumper on a hot day. It's a natural air conditioner strapped to their face. And third job, social signal. The bigger and brighter your beak, the more attractive you are to potential mates. It's the toucan equivalent of rolling into the pub with the flashiest ute. But it's not just about size. They use those beaks for play. Two toucans will sit across from each other, clacking bills, fencing like medieval knights. Sometimes they toss fruit back and forth, either as a game or as practice for courtship. Watching them juggle berries mid-air is something else. It's like watching circus performers doing tricks high above the forest floor. Now, let's talk sound. If you thought the beak was outrageous, wait until you hear them. Toucans are noisy. Their calls vary from species to species, but none are subtle. Some croak like frogs, deep and guttural. Others bark like little dogs. Some even rattle like a broken engine. Put a flock together, and it sounds like a jungle orchestra that's had one too many drinks. Out here at Cozy Camp, their racket would slice straight through the rain. It's part chorus, part argument, and all attitude. Why so loud? Territory and romance. A toucan croaks to warn off rivals, to keep the flock together, and to tell potential partners, "Oi, I'm here and I'm brilliant." They don't sneak, they don't whisper, they announce themselves. It's survival by volume. Diet's another surprise. You'd think with a beak like that, they'd be hunting big prey, but toucans are mainly fruit eaters. They raid fig trees, berry clusters, and tropical fruit like pros. With a flick of the head, they lob fruit into the air and swallow it whole. No chewing, just gulping. But they're not saints. If they find a nest, they won't hesitate to steal an egg or even snap up a chick. They'll eat insects, frogs, even the odd unlucky lizard. They're opportunists. If it fits in the beak, it's fair game. And by scoffing fruit, they become gardeners of the jungle. The seeds they swallow travel through their guts and get dumped far from the parent tree. Out sprouts a new fig, a new berry bush. The rainforest relies on creatures like toucans to keep spreading life around. They're flashy couriers, carrying the future of the forest in their guts without even thinking about it. Living in the canopy isn't all fruit and games, though. Predators are always watching. Hawks and eagles overhead, snakes slithering through branches, cats prowling below. Toucans don't fight predators head on. They rely on speed, flock alarm calls, and the ability to vanish sideways. One moment loud and proud, the next their shadows melting into leaves. It's a clever trick, being both showy and invisible, depending on the angle. Now, campers, let's talk family. Toucans don't build fancy nests. They squat. They find hollow trees carved by woodpeckers or created by rot, and they move in. The female lays 2 to 4 eggs, and both parents share the workload. They swap shifts, sitting on the eggs. They both feed the chicks. They both guard the hollow. That giant bill that looks like it could crush anything becomes a careful tool. delicately passing food into tiny beaks. Baby toucans hatch naked and blind, all awkward skin and squeaks. They grow fast though, and within weeks those beaks start sprouting. At first the bills are dull and stubby, but as the chicks grow the colors come in. By the time they're ready to leave the nest, they're mini versions of their parents, already learning to toss fruit like jugglers. It's a family affair, noisy and messy, but surprisingly tender. Courtship's just as theatrical as you'd expect. Males and females pass fruit like a romantic dinner date. They clack bills softly, tap each other's beaks, and preen one another's feathers. The bigger the beak, the better your chances, but skill counts too. A male who can toss and catch fruit with flair has an edge. Showmanship runs deep in the toucan family. And if you thought their noise was just for fun, think again. Those calls are alarms. One toucan spots a hawk. It croaks loud and sharp, and the whole flock bursts into flight. It's a jungle neighborhood watch. Their voices carry far, and predators know when they've been spotted. Here's something else. Toucans love a bit of rough and tumble. Watch a flock long enough, and you'll see them wrestling with their beaks, hanging upside down, even swinging by their toes. They're social birds that play like kids. It's not just about survival, it's about living loud. Now, since we're mates around this fire, let's ask the question we've been asking of every critter. Could a human beat a toucan in a fight? At first glance, too easy. The bird's light, fragile compared to us. But underestimate it and you'll cop a beak jab to the face. That bill might be hollow, but it's sharp and fast. A whole flock could leave you scratched, bleeding, and humiliated. You'd win in the end, sure, but you'd walk away looking like the loser. And in the jungle, reputation matters. If the trees are laughing at you, you've already lost. So here's the scene, campers. The fire crackles low, the rain hums steady, and high above us, a flock of toucans bounces between branches. Croaks echo, beaks clash, fruit sails through the air. They're the rowdy mob of the canopy, loud and proud, impossible to ignore. Where the sloth survives by silence and the raccoon by cunning, the toucan thrives by turning life into theater. And we've only scratched the surface. Because beyond the racket and the color, toucans carry stories that stretch from ancient legends to modern pop culture. But that's a yarn for the next stretch of the night.